Welcome to part 3 of the Roman Empire. Now we're going to take a look at Carthage and the First Punic War. Now, Rome's success in becoming a Mediterranean power is going to stem from a crucial couple of wars it's going to have to fight, known as the Punic Wars, right? This is going to be fought against their greatest enemy, the Carthaginian Empire. And in the second war, they're actually going to fight against their most capable general, a well-known general known as Hannibal, right? But this first Punic War that we'll discuss here is going to force Rome to face things they never had before, because for the first time ever, they're going to cease to be a land power based solely on that peninsula, and they're going to have to start looking out beyond there and become a naval power as well. So let's take a look at the situation here then when Rome had finally conquered the last of the independent Italian city-states on the peninsula there in 264 BCE. They've got the Italian boot all over under their control. The next stepping stone for them to be an empire would be that very crucial island that forms that bottleneck in the Mediterranean known as Sicily. Now, unfortunately for them, they have another empire that's growing at the same time that's also looking at Sicily and trying to think about some ways that they can incorporate into their empire, because they also are controlling the other side of that bottleneck. You see, here it is. You got Rome and the Italian boot there on the north side of that choke point in the Mediterranean. Carthage itself is based there on the African coast, right there on the other side, right? So both sides are looking towards Sicily. Now, the Carthaginians are an interesting group compared to the Romans. So the Romans are primarily farmers, right? It's a farming culture, whereas the Carthaginians are largely merchants, right? This is the remnants of the old Phoenicians that had moved across the Mediterranean, literally an eon ago. The Carthaginians possessed a huge navy, right? As a matter of fact, they have a huge navy, and whenever they want an army or need an army, they tended to hire mercenaries. They relied on themselves as a naval power, not a land power, whereas the Romans are the exact opposite. They relied on themselves as a land power and have no clue on how to be a naval power. The political structure of Carthage is an odd mixture of it's an oligarchy of sorts, right? Primarily made up of the wealthy merchant families, right? With a little scattering of democracy mixed in there. Right. Now, like I said, the result of Rome's desire to conquer Sicily means that they are going to have to take on this major naval power. So how are they going to do this? This is going to be real difficult for them, right? They've got to take Sicily, but they got to cross the waters to do that. They've got the Carthaginians that want to do the same, and they already have a navy. Rome has no navy of their own. So what do? Well, they're Romans. They begin building a navy. How did they do it? Well, they got lucky. They actually got a hold of a Carthaginian warship, and following Roman tradition, they took something that they found, a technology from another nation, and they reverse engineered it and copied it, right? They began training rowers. They began lining them on the beaches to practice, right? And they build up a navy. Now, the Romans are terrible sailors, right? They really are pretty bad. And matter of fact, when you take a look at the way naval battles had been conducted, even dating back to the ancient Greeks, these ships, what you do is you have these rowed ships that have a very strong, fortified nose with usually a ram on the end of it. And your typical tactic was to maneuver your ship, ram the enemy ship, and sink it, and drown the men on that ship. Well, the Romans don't have the skill set to really take on the Carthaginians in this fashion. So what they do instead is they figure, well, what we'll do is we're going to take these long movable gangplanks that have iron spikes on either end, and what we'll do is we'll row up and try and get alongside a Carthaginian ship, slap down this gangplank, right, and effectively connect the two ships together. Then Roman soldiers will hop onto the other ship, and you've effectively taken a sea battle and turned it into a de facto land battle, at least on the ships itself, right? Roman Marines cross the gangplank and take the ship. Now, the Romans began to win a series of rather shocking victories in Sicily, and they had occupied most of the island. But like I said, unfortunately for them, the Romans never really learned to be good sailors. So their fleet was there monitoring their progress on the Sicilian island when all of a sudden they noticed that the Carthaginian fleet withdrew, and they thought, oh, yeah, that's great news for us. But it wasn't good news for them, because what it was is the Carthaginians were watching the weather and saw that a pretty nasty storm was coming. And so they withdrew because they knew that. And the Roman fleet got caught in this terrible storm. And in a single day, out of the 250 Roman ships, only 8 of them were left afloat after the storm passed through. And literally tens of thousands of Romans had drowned in a single afternoon. Their navies effectively wiped out. So, what do the Romans do? Well, the Romans do what they always do. They spent the next 2 years building and training another fleet while holding on to Sicily the best they could. Okay, so they train this next fleet, they get the fleet all prepped, and no sooner they even get this next fleet out there, another storm sweeps in and wipes the fleet out again, right? So, what do the Romans do? They do what Romans do. They spend the next 4 years building another fleet that they'll dispatch in 249 BCE. This one is commanded by a man named Publius Claudius Pulcher, right? Now, before any battle, it was custom to take a look at the omens, right? And the way you did this on these ships is that you would place several sacred chickens on the deck. You'd gather grain in front of them, and if the chickens ate, that was a good omen. But if the chicken didn't eat, it was a bad omen, right? The chickens didn't eat. So Poulter's men spread the grain down. They have the chickens ready to go, and the chickens all refuse to eat. Poulter becomes enraged and he announced, if the chickens won't eat, then let them drink, and he threw them overboard and drowned them. And they were decimated by the Carthaginian fleet. They were decisively defeated, and what ships did survive that got caught in another storm and was completely wiped out. All right, 3 navies down. Meanwhile, back in Carthage, Carthage finally had an excellent land commander. Remember, like I said, they tend to hire mercenaries, so they don't have these great generals, but they finally got one. A guy by the name of Hamilcar Barca, right, which literally means Hamilcar the Thunderbolt. Okay. He lands in Sicily and begins sweeping the Romans off the island, right, recapturing most of the cities. Okay, so things are looking really bad for the Romans by this point. It looks like they're going to get pushed off of Sicily. The Carthaginians are maintaining control of the waters, and the Rome, of course, is in the process of trying to build yet another navy, which will take several years. But fortunately for the Romans, luck finally turned in their favor. A political faction took power in Carthage that was anti-war. And the result of this is they began to dismantle a large portion of the Carthaginian fleet. They began to refuse to send Hamilcar supplies or reinforcements. And so then Rome, rebuilding its fleet, began to land more Roman soldiers in Sicily and began to recapture most of it. So in 241 BCE, the First Punic War was finally over when the Carthaginians agreed to sign a truce, right? Now, the 3 important effects of the First Punic War was this. First of all, Carthage was forced to pay a large cash indemnity to Rome. So they had to pay a big fine to Rome. That was number 1. Number 2, Carthage had to give up all claims on Sicily. So they would no longer try to add Sicily to their empire. If they want to do any new empire building, they're going to have to look somewhere else. And finally, number 3, Rome formally annexed Sicily, and it became the first of Rome's overseas powers. Now, unlike the other places they conquered up to this point, which, you know, a city would become a socius, right? The cities would become socii, and they would be allies. In this case, on Sicily, Rome is going to establish a Roman governor, and Sicilians are going to be required not to pay with troops for the Roman army, but they're going to be required to pay taxes. Sicilians are not granted any form of Roman citizenship whatsoever, and so the Romans had set up the first of its provisional overseas empires. This is the beginning of their overseas empire building, and this model established in Sicily is the model that Rome will follow with all their newly conquered territories from this point moving forward.